So let's jump straight into it then. Why don't women like gym cells? Why is every in shape guy being priced out of the dating market apparently?
So gym cells, sure. So I put some pictures, a meme on Twitter, and I said, "Women, would you like this body type?" And of course, this is a fitness model. He's kind of jacked, and you get a lot of feedback that say, "No, I don't like that." And so they want kind of, or at least they say, right, a stated preference. They would prefer a guy with a dad bod, someone who's a little fluffier, perhaps more comfortable. And there may be different reasons for that. One of the kind of consistent feedback that came up was, okay, he seems like someone who might be kind of high maintenance. He seems like someone who might be a narcissist. These were kind of ideas associated with that. But deeper than that, it might be that this indicates perhaps a sense of untrustworthiness through the pathway of infidelity, so to speak. The idea that, okay, we have this man who's conventionally attractive, very good body. He has more options. And does that mean that he could cheat? And that's something that's seen in a lot of research on jealousy, for example, that mate value discrepancy predicts kind of these perceptions of unfaithfulness and higher jealousy. That if you have a partner who's maybe out of your league a little bit, that can make people really kind of uncomfortable in a relationship.
So that's related to high sociosexuality, the propensity to cheat, if I'm thinking correctly. Is that a heritable trait? Is it correlated with testosterone, which is why it might be closely correlated with the kind of guys that are in shape? Is it that it's correlated with the dark triad style narcissism? What's going on there on a psychological level?
Yeah, sociosexuality, sure. It is heritable, I think, between 0.3 and 0.5, like a lot in personality, of course, that 50-0-50 rule, that practically all behavioral personality traits are kind of somewhere in there, about half heritable. And yeah, that is associated with infidelity. But I think even more than that, so there are small associations with, for men, physical attractiveness and infidelity. For example, there was an article in Psychology Today that said, why you should not date a masculine, attractive man. And basically the whole article is all the research on like, oh yeah, an attractive guy who's masculine is more likely to cheat. And you do see a small association there. Interestingly, not with women, that with women, it seems unfaithfulness might be more associated with mid-level attractiveness, whereas higher level attractiveness in women seems to kind of have a curvilinear relationship. It kind of goes down there. So, but yeah, that's one perception, a hot guy that's out of their league and they think, okay, that could be something that is risky for me, that he might not commit. He might have too many options. And yeah, even just body comparisons, if someone says, yeah, this is someone that's much more attractive than I am, are they going to be super comfortable in that relationship? I don't know.
So is it true then that the Chads are getting all the girls, that it's super easy for those guys to go and clean up, and that women are only, what was the OkCupid data that you broke down? 80% of women are going for 20% of men, and all of their expectations look-wise are askew. Is that quite accurate? Because I've heard it repeated by quite a lot of Red Pill and Manosphere podcast talking heads.
Yeah, that has certainly filtered into the popular culture, the 80-20 rule, and that was something that was seen largely in dating app swipes, for example, that about 20% of the population got about 80% of kind of the matches. But if you look beyond that to message rates, messages that convert to phone numbers, there have been studies that have scraped all of these different messages that they got off of Tinder and that sort of a thing, to people that actually meet up in person and have casual sex or form relationships, you begin to see much closer parity, that it tends to be one-to-one. And similarly, if you look at individuals reporting their happiness with the use of the apps, in representative samples of the United States, you also see kind of about half of the people say, yeah, I'm pretty satisfied with this. Other half say no. And at the end of the day, it doesn't seem to be the case that regardless of these match rates that are very discrepant, in part because of a very large imbalance of gender ratio on these apps, right? There's many, many more men on these apps. So it's always going to be the case that some men are not going to get a lot of attention. But when you begin to look at actual sexual behavior, you begin to kind of see a different picture there, where the top 20% of men, top 20% of women, the so-called promiscuous 10 to 20%, they largely seem to be meeting each other, having sex within that pool, whereas kind of the remainder 80% of men and women, they tend to be following very close monogamous patterns, one partner over the course of the year, serial monogamy over the course of a long period of time, but typically not the high promiscuity associated with that promiscuous 10, 20% or so.
Right. So deviating from the stats there, this is something that I've been talking about with my colleague Dan, who is going to do a video with me on the economics of dating apps and the infrastructure and how technological solutions to courtship have been changing how dating and the landscape works. I've been a guinea pig for a little while, and I can tell you, I bloody hate it. These apps are awful. It's a sort of revolving door carousel of self-commodification that I think is designing you to stay on the app so it can sell you advertisements and subscription services, rather than obviously trying to lead to committed relationships. But the point you've raised is quite interesting there, is that particularly a lot of the pop evolutionary psychology doesn't delve into that stuff. It only delves into the single layer of heuristics. It only looks at the superficial swipes, rather than when we go beyond the superficial, how do your personality metrics, how does your awareness of intersexual dynamics lead to a higher success rate? So I'm just wondering if there are certain factors which are influencing the number of interactions that mean that the mid-level men who might be perceiving the chads having an easier time aren't having as many interactions, and this is why it's artificially sabotaging the numbers. Like, an example I'm thinking of is everyone that's on public transport these days is always looking at their phone, or even if they're walking around, they've got earphones in. And that just means that both men and women are de facto unapproachable. You're alone in a crowded place. And so the fewer instances of eye contact or stranger conversation means that fewer relationships are coming of that. Are you seeing those factors play into that?
Yeah, certainly there is that social isolation in a sense there, kind of like you described. If people are immersed in the online world, they may not be meeting up as much in person and interacting in person. People kind of isolate themselves in a bubble. And one thing related to that is the decline in friend group size right now, the decline in visiting live events and parties. There has been some research that looked at this, comparing the 1990s to now. People had much larger friend groups, 10 people on average for men. Now you see something like 50% of men that say they only have one friend, 20% have no friends at all. Very few people within that early age demographic, 18 to 25, would report having gone to an actual party in the last month, whereas in the 90s, it was practically all of them. So you see kind of that movement online where people are very, very isolated in a sense. And if that's the case as well, people go on these apps, they work for some people, they get some matches, but then if someone gets no matches and that's their only social interaction, their only way that they're reaching out for dating and romance, they can feel like they're completely isolated. And if they see someone else that even gets a little bit of attention, they think, yeah, that's got to be a Chad. He's got to be in the top 5% because my experience is like nothing at all. And it's like, yeah, he's probably, functioning for a lot of people, but if you are completely isolated, it can kind of augment that impact or that perception there.
So then, is it true that 27% of men 18 to 30 are virgins? Because I've seen this stat floated by, originally it was published in the Washington Post, if I remember correctly. And I've spoken about this before, but you've broken down the data in a much more nuanced way. So do you mind walking us through that? Sure.
So this is a chart, of course, that became really, really famous from 2018, and it continues to be circulated now. I'm sure everyone has seen it. So I call it kind of like a meme statistic at this point, because the chart is just everywhere. So the General Social Survey, the data taken from the General Social Survey by the Washington Post, they made a chart. And it said, this is the percentage of men that are virgins, basically. Well, the question it asked is like, have you had sex since age 18? But okay, but still, a fair proxy for virginity in that case. And it looked at 18 to 30, and it said, okay, this is 27% of men, 18 to 30, who are virgins. And it's okay. So that seems kind of high if you think about people at the end of the 20s. So I went into the GSS statistics and I broke it down by smaller age bands. We're looking at age 18 to 20, 20 to 23, 20 to 25, and so on. And when you look at the ages, it makes a lot more sense. You get a very high percentage of men who are actually virgins between 18 and 19 or so, which is what you should expect. And in other, maybe a better data set is the National Survey for Family Growth, shows a similar thing that, around 18 to 19, you can have, 50, 60, 70% of men who report, okay, I'm a virgin. But that drops off really quickly as every year goes on. By the time you get to about 25, 26, you get like lower than 5% that still report being virgins. So we see not that, this 27% of men remain virgins across this whole decade into their 30s, that this is a period of virginity for men right there at the beginning of, leaving adolescence, entering early adulthood, where they simply haven't had sex yet. But yeah, they're going to go on to pretty quick.
To watch the full video, please become a premium member at lotuseaters.com.